Now I get a lot of requests on this channel, which is why I'm a couple months behind, but I'm going to make up for one of them right now. Hello everybody, welcome to Savage Flies. I'm Matt, thanks for stopping by. So this pattern I'm about to tie, it's been requested a couple of times, most recently by Antonio Patrick. This is called the Skykomish Sunrise. Now this thing was created sometime in the 1930s by George McLeod. And the story has it, George was driving out to the Skykomish River with his dad, Ken McLeod, who was himself a pioneer of steelhead fishing in Washington, when they both saw this really beautiful sunrise, which inspired George to go back to the vise and come up with this pattern. And a couple days later, his dad had a great day on it, caught 7 huge steelhead with it, and the fly, caught on in the area, became pretty popular throughout the 30s and 40s. Then as the fly was really taking off in popularity, George goes off to World War II as a pilot flying the B-17 Flying Fortress. So he does 30 bombing missions over Germany, comes back a hero, and his fly is still really popular. It gains even more popularity through the 50s and 60s, and partly because in 1955 he caught a 29-pounder, which was then the world record steelhead. So the fly was hugely popular in the 50s and 60s. It's still popular today. I don't think you could find a steelhead book out there that doesn't have this in it. And it's really just a beautiful pattern. It's not that hard to tie. There are no exotic materials, and it's really just a fun pattern to tie. So whether you tie this in the classic steelhead sizes or downsize it a bit and tie it as a wet fly or a small streamer, I think it's still going to be a fish catcher for you. And I think you're going to like it. Let's give it a shot. So there it is in the vise, the Skykomish Sunrise. Now I think this is just one of the best looking, prettiest flies out there. Now, the sizes for this guy, I've seen it as big as a 2 and actually as small as a 12. I'm tying it on a size 6 regular salmon fly hook, and I'm going to use red thread. The pattern does call for red thread. I'm using a 70 denier, but yeah, you'd be fine going to the bigger one, maybe a 140 or up to a 6/0, but just lay a base down all the way to the point. Now here's where I've seen some patterns differ. A lot of them, or the original, definitely has a flat silver tinsel for a tag on the back. Some of the patterns skip that, and some of them use the oval tinsel that they're going to wrap for a rib. So I'm catching that in. I'm going, a couple millimeters back. I'll leave my thread hanging about the point of the hook where I'm going to, let's go just get it out of the way right there. But I'm going to put about 4 wraps of this for a tag. So if that gets me back up to about the point of the hook. Okay, so there's my tag. I'm going to back these last couple of wraps off and then catch it off right here. Okay, 2 wraps. Let's make a 3rd wrap pretty tight just to really lock that in right there. Okay, and I think we're good. Let's snip this excess off. And before we tie in our rib, we're going to go ahead and do our tail. And what you might want to do, just build a little thread bump right here. A few extra wraps if you want your tail to be propped up. Some of the patterns, have the tail sticking up, and some of them just have it sticking straight back. Now for the tail, sometimes you'll see it say red over yellow hackle fibers. Sometimes you'll see it just say red and yellow mixed. So I'm just kind of putting one on top of the other. I think it was just a little bit easier. These things don't mix all that well. But let's do a couple wraps right there and see what we're looking at. See, I like that kind of sticking up, maybe not that much. Let's take another wrap or 2 going back. Okay, yeah, I think that looks fine right there. Now, if you want to go ahead and snip those fronts, yeah, go ahead and do that. I'm going to be using a small chenille, so I'm going to leave this in here. Just some loose wraps going up, kind of thickening up my underbody a little bit. Okay, I'm still gonna have some stubs to trim off here, but that's easy enough to take care of. Okay, now we're gonna need to take our thread back and we'll tie in our rib next. So, small oval rib in silver. Now what you can do, and a lot of people will, they'll strip off some of that and just leave the thread core. It might make your tying point a little flatter, but in this case, I don't think it's at all necessary because we have a big fat chenille body and we don't have to worry too much about a lump back here. So I'm just going to catch the whole thing in, a few extra wraps right there. Now I'm going to catch my red chenille in. And this one I did strip it just to get a little bit of the bare thread core right there. It probably doesn't really matter, but let's go ahead and catch this in to where we're going to be wrapping it around back here. And I think that's going to be fine. Let's take our thread back up and don't get too far up because we do have 2 hackles we're going to wrap and a calf tail wing. So I made the mistake in one of them I tied earlier. I brought the body just a little too far forward and then my head was kind of clobbered. So be mindful of that. Now just take this touch and turns, wrap it all the way up to about where you think it needs to be. Okay, I think that is going to be fine right there. Let's catch this off and snip the chenille. Maybe a few extra wraps just to really lock that down. And I'm going to go ahead and counter wrap this rib. You know, I don't think it matters. It's not really for making it a stronger fly, but if you wrap it with the same way you wrap the chenille, some of these wraps might go down in those grooves and then you might lose sight of some of the rib. So I'm counter wrapping it just to keep it out of those grooves really. I think that's going to be fine right there. Let's catch this off with a couple of tight wraps. Now it's time for the hackle. The same stuff we used for the tail, just strong saddle hackle. Kind of cheap stuff right here. What I'll do is just pull it back, open it up, and you're going to be putting down some long fiber. See these right here? You can tell this is not a real high quality hackle for how they're just kind of going all over the place there. But I'll create a little V right there where I can catch this in. You could trim that piece before you wrapped it if you wanted to, but I found that when I do that, I tend to make a messier head. So do that with a red feather and then a yellow one. So let's pull this one out, create another little V with this yellow feather. Okay, now I've got both of these caught in, and I'm going to fold these back and then just take 1 or 2 wraps going back on it right there. And see, I've got a couple of fibers sticking forward, which is exactly what I was trying to avoid, but we'll just snip them. Okay, I think that's going to be fine. I'm going to put a couple of wraps just to make sure I don't pull this hackle out. And you could wrap them both at the same time, and I did that one on one and it looked fine, but I think it's just a little bit easier to go ahead and wrap them one at a time. And we're only doing maybe 3 wraps. I think it really depends on the quality of your hackle. So I think that's 4, and I kind of need 4 on this one. It's since the fiber density on this is just not real high. All right, let's catch this guy off right here. I'm gonna go ahead and snip this one before I wrap the red. All right, and it's gonna be messy for a little bit, but that's perfectly okay. So let's try to do the same thing with this red here. 3 or 4 wraps of this guy. Okay, I think that was 4, And don't worry that it's a big mess. We're gonna fix that in just a minute. Pretty much all of them that I've tied have been a little bit messy at this point. And this one is no exception. So we've caught this hackle in. I think we've got enough thread wrap so it's not gonna go anywhere on us. Just pull these back. And it's not that hard to pull back because they are pretty long fibers. Now just take some wraps back on that. We're gonna have to go a little bit farther back right here. So we want these swept back. Kind of like that. I got a couple of them going crazy. Tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and trim these before I tie in the wing, because it'd be a little harder to trim those after I put the wing on. Okay, that's going to be fine. A few of those are going all over the place, but that's all right. We can live with that. So let's do the wing now. It's going to be white calf tail. So how much calf tail? Well, totally depends on how big your hook is and how thick a piece you want. On this size 6, this is not a real big piece, but you definitely want it to be noticeable, and at least the length, I'd say to the bend of the hook, and try and stack it if you want to. If you're good at stacking calf tail, go for it. I've never been able to stack it and have it look very good. So catch it on right there. I think that is enough. And I've got to be careful that I don't mangle up my collar hackle. So I'm putting a few wraps going back, kind of tight, not terribly tight, but just tight enough when I cut the front that it's not going to slide out on me. So let's lift this up, and I'm going to have to cut this just a few fibers at a time. I got a couple of rogue ones here I'm going to trim before I clean up my head. And I think we're going to be okay with this head. Hopefully we can bury the rest of these white fibers here without it getting too big on us. But just take it right back into the eye and ramp it back up. Okay, I think we're going to be fine right there. Let's put a whip finish on it. And then we'll do a little cleanup if we need to before we do the head cement. Got a little cleanup. I captured one fiber right there, got it going way forward. You see that? Let's just snip this guy off. One thing I probably should have done before I tied that wing on was just take a hackle brush, a toothbrush, and tried to clean up that swept collar hackle. But I think we're good enough. This is a decent fishable fly. So just a little bit of head cement and this thing's going in my box. So that's it, everybody. I appreciate you watching. Y'all take care and we'll see you next time.